There are some people whose beauty changes everything. Not because beauty is powerful, but because human beings cannot stop worshipping it. For centuries, people have chased youth, admired it, desired it, envied it, and feared losing it, because deep inside, every human being knows a terrible truth. One day, the mirror changes. One day, time wins. One day, the face staring back becomes a stranger. And perhaps that fear has always lived inside us. The fear of growing old, the fear of losing what makes us desirable, the fear of becoming forgotten. Long ago, in the heart of London, there lived a young man who would discover exactly how dangerous those fears could become. His name was Dorian Gray, and his story would become one of the darkest tales ever written, because Dorian would receive something millions of people secretly dream about: eternal youth. But some gifts are actually curses wearing beautiful disguises. The summer afternoon felt unusually warm. Golden sunlight spilled through tall windows. Dust floated lazily through the air. And inside an elegant artist's studio, a painter named Basil Hallward stood before his greatest masterpiece, a portrait. Not an ordinary portrait, something extraordinary, something alive. Basil stared at the painting silently, almost nervously, because every artist experiences a rare moment in life when they create something that frightens them, a creation so beautiful that it reveals too much of themselves. And that was exactly what had happened. The portrait hanging before him was unlike anything he had ever painted. The young man inside the canvas seemed almost real. His face possessed impossible beauty. Clear eyes, perfect features, youth untouched by time, innocence untouched by corruption. Looking at the portrait felt less like observing a painting and more like witnessing a miracle. The young man in the painting was Dorian Gray. That afternoon, Basil received a visitor, a man who would unknowingly destroy everything. Lord Henry Wotton, charming, intelligent, dangerous. The kind of person whose words entered your mind and refused to leave. Lord Henry believed something unusual. He believed morality was mostly an illusion, that pleasure mattered more than virtue, that life should be experienced completely, without guilt, without restraint, without regret, and perhaps most dangerously, he knew exactly how to make these ideas sound beautiful. Because dangerous ideas rarely arrive looking dangerous. They arrive dressed as wisdom. Lord Henry entered the studio casually, but the moment he saw the portrait, he stopped. Completely speechless, even he, a man rarely impressed by anything, felt stunned. "Who is he?" he asked quietly. Basil hesitated, because something about Dorian made him uncomfortable. Not fear, not exactly. Something deeper, an awareness that this young man possessed unusual influence over people. "He is Dorian Gray," Basil finally answered, and in that moment, history quietly changed direction. Soon afterward, Dorian himself arrived, young, handsome, confident, yet surprisingly innocent. He carried none of the arrogance usually associated with beauty. At least not yet. Dorian greeted Basil warmly, then noticed Lord Henry observing him. There was something strange about Lord Henry's gaze. Not judgment, not admiration. Curiosity, as if he had discovered an interesting experiment, and perhaps he had, because Lord Henry immediately recognized something important. Dorian had never truly understood his own beauty. Not completely, not yet. And once someone becomes aware of their power, everything changes. Lord Henry began speaking, casually at first, simple observations, small philosophical ideas, but every sentence carried hidden poison. "Dorian," he said softly, "youth is the most valuable thing in existence." Dorian listened politely. Lord Henry continued. "One day," he said, "your beauty will disappear. The mirror will become cruel. People will stop admiring you, and everything you possess now will slowly fade." The room became silent. Dorian laughed nervously. But something inside him shifted. For the first time, He truly thought about aging, not as an abstract idea, not as something distant, but as a certainty, a future waiting patiently for him. And suddenly, the future seemed terrifying, because before that moment, he had taken beauty for granted. Now, he realized it was temporary. And temporary things become precious the moment we realize they can be lost. Lord Henry continued speaking, every word sinking deeper, like seeds being planted inside fertile soil. Youth is brief. Beauty is brief. Life is brief. So enjoy everything. Experience everything. Deny yourself nothing. To Lord Henry, this sounded liberating. To Dorian, it sounded like revelation. And perhaps that was the tragedy, because some people enter our lives and change us forever, not through force, not through cruelty, but through ideas. One conversation, one sentence, one moment can alter an entire destiny. Dorian did not realize it then, but the person he had been that morning was already disappearing. Later that evening, the portrait was finally completed. Basil stepped back proudly. The masterpiece stood before them. Perfect, timeless, beautiful. Dorian approached the painting slowly, and for a moment, he simply stared. The portrait captured everything, every detail, every strength, every possibility. It showed him exactly as he was, young, alive, beautiful, and suddenly, instead of joy, he felt grief, because he understood something horrifying. The portrait would remain beautiful forever, but he would not. The painting would stay young. He would grow old. The painting would remain perfect. He would change. And for the first time in his life, Dorian Gray hated time. Then, in a moment of emotion, he spoke words that would change everything. Words he never truly meant. At least not completely. If only, he whispered. If only the portrait could grow old instead of me. If only I could stay young forever. I would give anything for that. Anything. Even his soul. The room became silent. No thunder. No dramatic warning. No sign that anything unusual had happened. Only silence. Because evil rarely announces itself. Sometimes it simply waits. That night, Dorian Gray went to sleep believing nothing had changed. Believing his life would continue normally. But somewhere beyond reason, beyond logic, beyond understanding, bargain had already begun. And soon, beauty itself would become a prison. That night, Dorian Gray returned home. The city outside continued as always. Carriages rolled through dark streets. Lamps flickered beneath the London fog. And somewhere in the distance, a clock quietly counted the passing hours. Everything appeared normal, unchanged. But inside Dorian's mind, something had already begun. The seed had been planted. A dangerous idea. For the first time in his life, he was no longer thinking about how beautiful he was. He was thinking about how beautiful he would not remain. And once a person becomes afraid of losing something, that fear can consume everything. The portrait remained silent, motionless, perfect, waiting. As if it knew something Dorian did not, as if it were watching him, patiently, quietly, from the shadows. And somewhere beyond reason, beyond logic, beyond understanding, fate had already begun moving. Because Lord Henry's words were still echoing inside Dorian's mind. Youth is the only thing worth having. Beauty is the only thing worth keeping. And Dorian believed him. He did not know it yet, but those words would change his life forever. They would lead him toward obsession, toward desire, toward corruption, and eventually toward darkness. A darkness so deep that even his own reflection would one day terrify him. For now, the young man slept peacefully, unaware that his soul had already begun its journey into the unknown. And the portrait waited. But this was only the beginning. Because in the next chapter, a new influence will enter Dorian's life. An influence far more dangerous than he could ever imagine. One that will slowly transform admiration into obsession, and curiosity into destruction. And once that transformation begins, there will be no turning back. You have been listening to The Picture of Dorian Gray, Chapter 1, The Beautiful Young Man. And here at NOIIR, we explore stories of beauty, madness, human nature, and the darkness hidden beneath ordinary lives. If you enjoyed this journey, subscribe and join us for Chapter 2. Because some stories are not meant to be rushed. They are meant to unfold one shadow at a time.